Dust was already in the sky when the morning cracked open over Coulter Ridge. Not the playful dust of galloping hooves or wagon trails, but a still, old dust, the kind that settles after something has died. It hung in the air like a held breath, thin and gold and cruel. The wind blew low across the land, dragging old prayers through splintered fences and half-fallen windmills. Sagebrush rattled like bones. Somewhere out in that vast Wyoming hush, a hawk circled without sound. Boaz Coulter stirred before the sun. His boots struck the ground like declarations, worn leather scuffed at the toe, blackened by creek mud and smoke. His limp was subtle now. After 6 years, it had settled into him like an old tune. He worked alone, always had. Since the fire. Since the voices in town had turned whisper thin and sharp-edged, naming him cursed, unlucky, dangerous to love. He carried that silence like a second coat. The barn creaked when he opened it, warm breath rising from the horse stalls. The animals didn't look at him anymore, they knew his patterns. Feed, water, check the north fence. Repair whatever time and weather had chewed through in the night. By mid-morning he was cinching rope around a haystack when old Reed Bellows from town pulled up on a jittery mule cart, trailing gossip like steam. Boaz didn't wave, didn't smile, just waited. "You hear what they're doing, Coulter?" Reed said, spitting dust. "That widow girl passed through 2 days ago, Nora or Nilla, something like that, she and the little one. Busted wheel. Her man's gone, they say. Died from his own temper." Boaz stayed quiet. "Well, Crim's got him now. And word is, there's a sale this morning. Town edge. Trunk's involved. Not that it's your business." Boaz tied the last knot and turned. "You say trunk?" Reed blinked. "Yeah. Why?" Boaz's hand tightened on the rope. "She inside it?" Reed snorted. "That's the word. She's fat, so they didn't want her on display. Reckon they didn't want no noise neither. One of them girls been begging folks to look. Real mouthy one. Can't be more'n 7. Boaz said nothing. But he left the rope where it lay and walked toward his horse. Not fast. Not slow. Just decided. The sky had turned the color of old brass by the time he reached the edge of town. Flies buzzed in tight circles. There, beside the livery barn and a stack of discarded coffins, sat a wagon that looked more rust than wood. The wheel hung sideways. The canvas top was peeled back like skin. 2 small girls stood near it, one clinging to the other. Burlap sacks tied around their torsos like flower bundles, necks too thin, eyes too wide. A man with a ledger checked boxes as folk passed, dropping coins into a pail. One girl, maybe 9, was sold already. Carried off by a toothless woman with a bent spine. Laughter rose from the crowd like smoke from something bad burning. Then the younger girl stepped forward, dirt-streaked, eyes black with fire. "Rancher," she said, spotting him in the shadow of his horse. "She's too weak to beg. Please don't let them bury her in that box." It was not a plea. It was a command spoken through cracked lips. Boaz dismounted. The man with the ledger stepped up. "Now hold on, mister. You want one, you pay like the rest." Boaz's hand rested on the hilt of his knife, slow and deliberate. The man stepped back. Boaz walked past the girls. One tried to grab his coat. The other just watched. He knelt by the trunk. The metal latch was rusted, but the rope holding it closed was newer, tight, harshly pulled. Someone had taken time to tie it with cruel intent. He cut it. The lid creaked open. There was no gasp, no shock, just silence. Inside, a woman lay curled like something long dead but still warm. Her dress was the color of crushed apricots, stained darker at the hem. Her hair, brown, matted, damp, stuck to her cheeks. Her face was flushed, but her lips were blue. She blinked once. And Boaz, who hadn't let himself feel anything in 6 years, felt something now. She looked not at him but at the sky behind him. And her first word, barely shaped, was, "Water." He stood, scooped her into his arms without a word. She was heavy, not in a way that strained him but in a way that felt true. Solid. Real. Like something the world had tried and failed to discard. The little girl ran ahead, shouting, "Don't drop her. Don't drop my sister." Boaz didn't. He held her like he'd held his own wife the day the fire came. Not fragile. Just close. The town watched. Mabel Crimp gasped. That's her. The one from the card game mess last spring. The one they say let a man die in the wagon, 'cause he was too drunk to walk. She's ruined. She's fat, someone added. She'll eat him alive. Boaz didn't blink. He loaded her into the saddle first, mounted behind her, the girl pulling herself up awkwardly in front. The man with the ledger called, "You can't just take her." Boaz turned. "She ain't yours." He rode off. By dusk, the cabin stood quiet again, candlelight flickering inside like a soul refusing to go out. Boaz laid the woman down on the cot near the hearth, set the girl beside her, and walked out to pump water. When he came back, the girl was crying. "She always makes sure I eat first," she said, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Even when we was with Pa. Even when he sold her. He said we was too poor to keep someone who couldn't run fast or look pretty." Boaz handed her the cup. She stared at him, then at her sister. "Her name's Nerlin," she whispered. He nodded once. "Yours?" "Millie." He ruffled her hair without thought. She flinched, then leaned in. Inside, Nara stirred. Her eyes fluttered open again. They were deep brown, glossy with fever. He brought the cup to her lips. She turned her face. "Feed Millie," she whispered. "I did." She didn't speak again. The next morning, Boaz sat on the porch sharpening his knife. The girl, Millie, was drawing circles in the dirt with a stick. Every so often, she looked toward the door, waiting for her sister to rise. "She tried to leave before," Millie said suddenly. "Before the trunk. After Pa died and the man tried to buy us both. She ran in the night. They caught her. Said fat women shouldn't pretend to be fast." Boaz's jaw flexed. "You think she's pretty?" Millie asked, blunt as bone. He paused. "Then, I think she's alive. That's more than what some folks wanted." Inside, Nara stirred again. She pushed herself upright, only halfway, before falling back against the wall. Her breath came in sharp pulls. Her feet were bare, cracked at the heels, rope burns circling her ankles. Boaz walked in, left a basin of warm water and a cloth beside her. "You can wash when you want," he said. She didn't look at him. Just stared into the fire, eyes hollow as old tin. Later that night, Boaz heard movement. The door creaked. He stepped outside and saw her crawling down the porch steps on her knees. "Where are you going?" he asked, not unkindly. She froze. Her voice was hoarse. "If I stay, they'll come for her too. I don't want to rot in someone else's shame." "You're not shamed," he said. She looked up, startled. "You're breathing," he added. "And I got no plans to put you back in a box." She began to cry. Not loud. Just steady. Like rain on a tin roof. Boaz didn't touch her. Just opened the door and waited. She crawled back inside. And in the dark, Millie whispered, "Do we have to leave again?" Boaz didn't answer. But he didn't close the door either. The next morning, a rooster crowed too early. Boaz rose before the sun and found a fresh strip of cloth tied to the door handle. "Millie's doing likely." Or Nara's. It was stitched with one crooked word, "Thank you." He traced the thread with his thumb. But before he could unhook it, hooves sounded on the trail. Town riders. And behind them, smoke. The kind that doesn't come from a chimney. The morning broke soft and gray, with dew gathered on fence wire and fog drifting low across the Coulter pasture like smoke too shy to rise. The world had gone quiet after the warning hooves the night before. Boaz had kept one hand near his rifle and one ear on the floorboards, but nothing came. Just wind. Just silence. Still, something had shifted. In him. In the air. In the way the house held its breath. Inside the cabin, Nerlin stirred, her hand gripping the edge of the cot as if unsure if she'd earned the right to wake up here. Millie was already up, curled by the fire like a pup, her cheek marked with soot where she'd slept too close to the hearth. Nara's breath was shallow, but she didn't wheeze any more. Her lips were no longer blue and her eyes, though dull, seemed present. Boaz watched from the doorway, mug of black coffee in hand. He didn't speak. She didn't look at him. Her shoulders were turned in, hands folded over her belly as though protecting something that had long since been taken. Still she was alive. And he'd seen what it meant when someone decided to live again. He set the mug down and left a small pile of boiled potatoes, buttered with salt and herbs from the garden. No fork. Just a wooden spoon beside a folded cloth. She didn't eat at first. When he returned from chopping wood, half the potatoes were gone, and the spoon had been cleaned and placed back in the cloth. Not a word was spoken. That afternoon, Millie sat on the porch, legs swinging, humming something made up. Boaz sat nearby, oiling the hinges of the back gate. "She can't stand mirrors," Millie said suddenly. He didn't look up. "She broke the last one with her boot. She said her face used to be different before the trunk." Boaz nodded, slow. "Faces don't stay the same. Not after bad things. She got big after Pa died. She didn't eat more. She just stopped hiding. But people don't like when you stop hiding." Boaz paused his work. "She's still Nara to me," Millie said, brushing a fly off her cheek. "She still braids my hair." Boaz turned to the barn. "Come on. We'll get water." Millie ran inside to fetch the bucket. When she re-emerged, Nara was standing in the doorway behind her, barefoot, hesitant. Her dress hung loose at the shoulders, threadbare at the seams. Her hair was tied back, but only loosely, as if she hadn't quite committed to caring yet. Boaz looked at her. She looked past him. He didn't offer help, just began walking. They followed. The trail to the creek was shaded by ash trees, branches low, thick with yellowing leaves. Wild mint grew near the water, and its scent reached them before the current did. Birds flitted between trunks. A hawk called somewhere overhead. Boaz crouched and filled the bucket, cold water sloshing up his forearms. He set it down on a flat rock, then stepped back. Millie ran ahead, dipping her toes in, laughing. Then she stepped aside. Nara stood at the bank, looking down at her reflection in the slow, brown water. A breeze came up. Her hands trembled as she knelt. Boaz said nothing. Neither did Millie. Nara reached out, fingers hovering just above the surface. Then she touched it. Her gasp was almost a sob. The cold shocked her, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward, cupped the water in both hands, and let it trail down her wrists, over her arms, into her sleeves. Her body shook. Not with cold, but with something older. Something cracked loose. She dragged her hands down her face, washed the dirt from her neck, her cheeks, her mouth. And then she wept. Not the polite kind. Not hidden. Her whole body bent forward, shoulders buckling, breath hitching like a child's. She covered her face and didn't stop. Boaz didn't move. Millie walked forward, wrapped her small arms around her sister's waist, and held her as tightly as a child could. Her feet were wet. Her hair blew into her face. When Nara finally sat back, her face was clean, red from scrubbing and raw from salt, but clean. "I forgot what water felt like," she whispered. Boaz handed her a square of flannel. She took it without looking at him. That night, she said her first words to him inside the cabin. "I don't want your pity," she said softly. He didn't respond. "I don't want to be saved." He stood at the window, back to her. "Didn't say you were." She studied him. He didn't flinch under her gaze. "I didn't ask you to open that trunk," she added. He turned now, met her eyes. "She did, Millie." Nara lowered her eyes. "I don't know how to thank someone for this." "Don't?" His voice was quiet. "I still don't know if I want to live." Boaz nodded once. "You're not the only one." She closed her mouth. Outside, wind passed through the eaves like a voice trying not to wake anyone. Inside it was warm and dim. The lamp flickered. Later, as Boaz stripped a splinter from a chair leg by the fire, Nara crept forward and placed something beside his boot. It was a single spool of thread and a needle. "My hands are still steady," she said. He looked up. "For sewing," she added. "If you need." He nodded once. She returned to the cot. The next morning, Boaz set a folded shirt beside the needle. The seam was torn. The buttons were missing. He didn't say anything. By dusk, the buttons were back. The seam stitched clean. She left the shirt where he'd left it. That night, Millie lay curled beside her sister, breathing slow and deep. Nara sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling. Boaz sat at the table carving something small from wood. "Do you still talk to anyone?" she asked him. He didn't look up. "Not much." "Why?" "Don't trust people who watched my house burn and called it God's will." She swallowed. "You lost someone?" "My wife. And our boy." Her hands tightened around the blanket. "I thought I was the only one walking around with ghosts." He let the carving rest. "Don't mean we can't build something for the living," he said. For a long time Nara didn't move. Then she lay back down and closed her eyes. She slept the whole night through. In the morning she stood on her own 2 feet and walked to the porch. She sat beside Millie and watched the horizon for nearly an hour. Boaz came out and handed her a cup of warm chicory brew. She took it with both hands, sipped, and didn't say a word. Later he found a strip of linen draped over the porch rail, embroidered with a bird in flight, clumsy but beautiful. She'd stitched it in the night. He took it inside and nailed it above the hearth. At noon she washed the basin herself. At dusk she asked if he had thread in other colors. And as the sky turned peach and lilac over the hills, they stood watching the light bleed out together. Then came the sound of hooves again. Closer this time. This time not passing. This time stopping. The wagon path into town cut narrow through the dried sage, flanked by brittle fences and prayer-stiff cottonwood trees. The sun rose like an accusation that morning, hot, white, and staring. Nara walked behind Boaz with Millie skipping just ahead, her shoes tied with twine, her hands clutching a folded drawing she intended to trade for boiled sweets. Nara's borrowed dress clung to her in the wrong places, loose at the shoulders but pulling tight around the middle. She tried to let out the seams, but the fabric was old and stubborn like most folks in these parts. She kept her eyes forward and her mouth shut, but still the whispers floated from porches and windows like hornets off the hive. "That's her. The one he pulled from a box. I heard she was sold by weight like grain. No wonder her daddy traded her off. A girl that size eats a future dry." The words didn't sting as sharply as they used to, but they still left marks. They always did. Shame soaked deeper than water. Boaz didn't glance back. He walked slow, his stride easy as if they were all just heading in for flour or nails. At the general store Millie darted inside. Boaz followed, leaving Nara alone for a breath too long on the boardwalk. Her reflection caught in the window, a silhouette framed by morning glare. Wide-hipped, soft-armed, thick through the middle. Her hair was pinned back now, and her skin had begun to heal from the trunk's dark stink. But none of that changed what people saw first. Behind her, the door to Maybelle Crimp's shop creaked open. Well, Maybelle crowed, voice dipped in syrup and spit. "The trunk girl walks." Nara didn't turn. "Don't suppose you've got coin? Or pride?" Still she said nothing. Boaz Coulter must have cracked something in the head, dragging you out in front of decent folk. Don't think the good book has a verse for dragging us out a Sunday. Nara turned slowly, eyes level and low. "You sell dresses. You don't make them. So I don't reckon you understand how a seam breaks." Maybelle blinked, momentarily thrown. Nara's voice held no venom. Just tired truth. When something pulls too long on the wrong thread, it gives. Ain't shameful. Just what happens when folk force what don't fit. Before Maybelle could reply, Boaz stepped from the store, arms full of burlap and flour. His gaze moved from Nara to Maybelle and back again. Then, without speaking, he handed Nara a bundle of blue calico fabric and a small tin of buttons. "For your sewing," he said. She took it. Her hands didn't shake. The walk home was quiet. Millie trailed behind, sucking on a lemon candy, humming off-key. When they reached the cabin, Nara set to boiling water and measuring flour for biscuits. She didn't speak until Boaz returned from stabling the horse. "I want to do something," she said. He paused by the door. "With the fabric." He nodded once. That night, Nara sat by the hearth, stitching by lamplight. Millie curled beside her with a scrap of quilt and one sock on, one off. Boaz carved by the door, shaping the same block of wood he'd been working for days. "I used to make dresses back home," Nara said. "Pa said it was a waste of time. No man wanted a woman with thick fingers and ideas. But I could make a hem hold against anything." Boaz didn't interrupt. "Then Pa lost the land in a poker game. Lost me not long after. She didn't look up. Just stitched. He told the man I came with extra warmth. That was the word he used. Warmth. Boaz's carving slowed. They put me in a wagon with empty sacks. Called it dowry. Said if I was going to eat a man's wages, I'd better learn to make my own dress. Boaz stood and walked outside. He stayed gone a long while. When he returned, he placed a small cedar box beside the fire. Inside were spools of thread, bone buttons, and a pair of silver embroidery scissors, dulled but whole. She looked up. They were hers, he said simply. My wife's. Nara didn't speak. Just touched the scissors with reverence as if they might turn to ash. In the days that followed she sewed. Not for herself, but for children. Simple dresses. Clean seams. Hand-stitched with care and patience. She left them folded in baskets or draped over fences near cabins with loud children and tired mothers. No one said thank you. Not at first. But they stopped whispering. Millie helped. She chose colors. Drew shapes. Nara turned them into flowers and stars with needle and thread. One afternoon a soft knock came at the cabin door. Boaz opened it to find a small girl, freckled, wide-eyed, wearing one of Nara's dresses. She clutched a hand-picked bouquet and handed it up to him silently. Then ran. Nara watched from the shadows, hand over her mouth. You gave her something her mama couldn't, Boaz said. Don't let it shrink you. But it did. In a way. Not in size. But in the parts of her that used to brace for cruelty. That evening, while folding laundry, she caught her reflection in the kettle. And for the first time she didn't look away. That night she stood on the porch, staring at the stars. Boaz joined her after a long moment, holding 2 mugs of coffee. They stood in silence, side by side. When you look at me, what do you see? She asked softly. He sipped, then answered. Someone still standing. She breathed in slow and deep. You scare them, he added. Not 'cause you're big. 'Cause you're not broken. She laughed once, quiet and raw. I used to be. He looked at her then. We all were. Before she could reply, the sound of boots echoed up the hill. 3 riders. Lanterns swinging. Boaz stepped forward. One rider dismounted, Deputy Jed Hoskins. He tipped his hat without warmth. Evenin'. Got word you're harborin' a woman under suspicion. Name of Narlin. Accompanied by a minor. Boaz's jaw clenched. She's not hiding. Still. Some say she was sold legal. Man wants her back, says he paid good coin. She was packed in a box. Didn't ask for the packaging, Jed said with a sneer. Boaz didn't move. Jed held up a folded paper. Got a warrant? Says if she don't come peaceful, we'll take her like freight. Behind him, Nara stepped into the doorway. She wore a fresh dress, one she'd made herself. No ribbons. No frills. Just strong stitching and a hem that didn't ask forgiveness. I'll go, she said. Boaz turned sharply. No. I won't let them take Millie. Millie's not going. Jed raised a brow. Then the law decides. Nara stepped forward. What law takes a woman from a home that feeds her? From a child that sleeps through the night for the first time in months? Jed narrowed his eyes. The law that says you were sold and a sale is binding. Boaz stepped between them. Jed's hand moved toward his holster. Then from inside the cabin Millie's voice rang out, sharp and clear. You can't take her. She's mine. Jed blinked. Nara knelt. Millie, hush. But the girl marched out barefoot, eyes shining. She's my sister. She braided my hair. She gave away her food when I cried. She sings when I have bad dreams. You can't take her. The deputy looked stunned. Boaz said nothing. Then Nara stood and faced Jed. If I was thinner, quieter, prettier, would you still call me property? Jed looked away. Nara's voice softened. You think I'm big enough to carry shame, but not dignity. Boaz spoke, voice low. She's not going anywhere. Jed's mouth opened, closed. He stepped back, lifted the paper. This ain't over. Boaz nodded. Then send better paper. The men rode off, dust kicking up behind them. As silence settled, Nara slumped to her knees. Boaz helped her up. His hands didn't tremble. Inside, Millie lit the fire. Outside, stars returned. And the next morning, on the porch rail, sat a folded note. No name. Just 2 words. She's free. The breeze came up soft that morning, stirring the clothespins before the sun had fully crested the ridge. Nara stood barefoot on the porch, a woven basket at her hip and 6 little dresses draped over her forearm. Each one was different: calico, muslin, gingham, stitched by lantern light, some with tiny mismatched buttons, others with pockets cut from old pillowcases. They were small, meant for girls no older than 10, and they fluttered like flags as she stepped into the yard. The line stretched from the porch post to the lowest limb of the bent cedar tree, bowed from years of wind. She pinned them one by one. A red one with sunflower trim. A pale yellow with twill cuffs. A green and white striped one that Millie insisted had to have a secret inside pocket, for rocks or wishes or bread. The last one was the plainest. Blue-gray, hemmed simply. It had been Nara's favorite. When she stepped back, the line looked like a prayer in the wind. Quiet. Brave. She didn't notice Boaz watching from the barn. He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, a splinter caught in the crease of his palm. The sight of her, barefoot, calm, sunlight brushing her hair, was like catching a memory you'd forgotten you missed. Millie burst from the cabin, braids crooked, holding a tin pail. We're talking today, right? I want to see who smiles first. Nara smiled. Go get your shawl. The wind's mean today. The plan was simple. They would walk into town early, long before the gossipers left their porches. Nara would carry the dresses. Millie would carry the pail. Boaz offered to drive the wagon, but Nara shook her head. I want my feet to know the road. They walked the whole way in silence, save for Millie's soft humming and the occasional bark of a dog behind a fence. When they reached the first house, a widow with 4 children and no curtains, Nara placed the yellow dress inside the pail and hung it gently on the gate. They moved on before anyone came to the door. The next stop was a cabin leaning westward. 2 girls lived there, always barefoot, always watching from behind the door. Nara placed the red sunflower dress on the porch rail, weighted with a polished rock. By noon, all 6 dresses were gone. They didn't speak of it that night. Boaz fixed a hinge. Millie drew suns on scraps of paper. Nara stirred stew. But something had changed. The next morning, as Boaz saddled the mule, he noticed a child in a red dress darting through the livery yard. Her hair was brushed. Her steps were lighter. She held the hem as though it might lift her. Later, while sharpening the axe, he saw another girl in the striped dress skipping along the ditch, a pebble tucked in her pocket. Nara didn't say a word, but she began sewing again that night with more thread and a quieter breath. That week the gossip thickened. Mabel Crimp cornered Boaz near the smithy. She's turning your place into a charity house. Boaz didn't reply. She thinks this is grace? It's flaunting. Those dresses are a mockery. You think poor folks want handouts sewn by a woman who couldn't keep a man or her weight in line? He looked at her slowly, then said, If you got a hole in your dress, Mabel, I reckon Nara'd fix it too. She flinched like he'd slapped her. She's ruining your name. Boaz shrugged. Been ruined longer than she's been here. Maybe she's repairing more than just cloth. That night, Nara sat on the porch, needle between her fingers. She worked slower now. Not tired, careful. As though every stitch was an offering. Boaz brought out a small crate. For you, he said. Inside, faded bolts of fabric. Old, clean, rich in color. Mustard yellows, sea blue, burgundy. They'd belonged to his mother. Nara reached for a length of blue with trembling fingers. I never thought I'd be worth new colors, she whispered. Boaz looked at her. They were always yours. Just took the world too long to notice. The next Sunday the church bell rang sharp and high, calling sinners and saints to sit beside one another and pretend they weren't the same thing. Boaz didn't go. He hadn't in years. But Nara, when asked, said only, I want to see what I look like among people who still think I'm invisible. She wore the blue dress. It fit well. Not perfectly, nothing ever did, but it held her frame with dignity. Her hair was braided and pinned with a carved button Millie found in the dirt. When they walked into the churchyard, silence followed like a second shadow. Millie held her hand. They took the back pew. Nara's shoulders didn't hunch. Her eyes didn't drop. The preacher spoke of grace and stones and how to know the difference between guilt and growth. When the service ended, Nara rose slow and steady. She didn't rush to leave. Outside, a woman she didn't know approached. Gray dress, pale bonnet, eyes like weathered slate. "My girl wears what you made," she said simply. Nara nodded, unsure. "She says it makes her brave." Then the woman turned and walked away. That afternoon, Boaz fixed the porch step while Nara hung another line of dresses to dry. 6 more. Each more hopeful than the last. But as she reached for the last clothespin, a sharp whistle cut the quiet. Millie turned. From the ridge rode 2 men. Dark coats, high collars, eyes sharp. Deputy Jed again. And behind him, a stranger with a ledger book and a gold chain tucked into his vest. Boaz stepped out of the barn before they reached the yard. Jed spoke first. "Got a question needs answerin'. Man here says he's got ties to the woman under your roof. Claims she was part of a debt transfer, legal and binding." Nara stepped forward. The stranger looked her over with the indifference of a butcher choosing meat. "She's the one," he said. "Weight's the same." Boaz's face darkened. Nara didn't flinch. "That man locked me in a trunk. Sold my silence. That's not a debt. That's a cage." Jed hesitated. Boaz stepped in. "You take one more step, you're stepping onto my land with bad intent." The stranger smirked. "Intent don't matter when the law says otherwise." Jed looked between them, uncertain. And then behind them all came the smallest sound. A line snapping. One of the dresses, blue, the one with the bird embroidered in flight, fluttered to the ground. Nara stepped forward, picked it up, and held it close like a child. "I sew for the girls no one else remembers," she said, voice low. "And I will not go back to a box so men can forget they ever bought me." Boaz moved beside her. "You're not going anywhere," he said. Millie ran to the porch, shouting, Tell them what the lady said at church." Jed's eyes narrowed. "What lady?" "The one who said the dress made her girl brave." The silence held. Then from the tree line a voice called out, "That girl's wearing one too." Heads turned. 3 children stepped out from the brush, one after the other, each in a dress from Nara's hands. And behind them slowly came the women, quiet, resolute, holding their daughters' hands. They didn't speak. They stood. Boaz's voice was calm now. "You can bring all the papers you want. But this land, this place, it answers to more than ink and weight." Jed took a breath, folded the paper, and didn't meet anyone's eyes. The stranger backed his horse slowly. Boaz stepped onto the porch. Nara followed. Behind her, the dresses danced again in the wind. And somewhere deep in the cedar grove, another line was hung. With a 7th dress waiting. Boaz woke before the rooster. He sat at the edge of the bed, boots in hand, listening to the wind press against the cabin walls like breath on a neck. The sky outside was still blue-black, but something about the silence felt too expectant, like the moment before a storm declares itself. In the hearth's embers the cedar box still sat, half open, full of thread and pins. Nara's work lay folded beside it, a 7th dress unfinished, the hem waiting on a final line of stitches. She hadn't touched it since the stranger rode off. In the days since she'd gone quiet, not withdrawn but watchful, as though some part of her still feared the knock that would come when Boaz wasn't home. Millie sensed it too. She slept curled against her sister each night, small hands fisted around Nara's dress as if touch alone could keep someone rooted. Boaz stepped out into the cold, his rifle strapped across his back. The wind carried a sharpness that hinted at snow. Far off, down the ridge trail, 2 figures rode again. He didn't wait for them to announce themselves this time. He met them halfway. Jed dismounted first. "Morning, Coulter. Didn't think you'd be up." "You thought wrong." The man beside him wasn't the same one from before. This one was younger. Clean coat. Pin badge. A marshal. And between them in hand, was a slip of parchment stamped red. "We're not here for her," Jed said quickly. "He is." The marshal spoke plain. "I'm here for the man who trafficked her. Name's Langford. He crossed county lines. We got a witness." Girl 9 years old. Said she watched her sister stuffed in a box. Said a rancher pulled her out. Boaz didn't blink. That girl still talking? She is. She's safe. She is now. Jed looked away, ashamed maybe, or just tired. The marshal continued. But I need your witness. The one who walked out of the church wearing the blue dress. Boaz paused. She's got no faith in courts. She don't need faith. Just her truth. And her voice. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Nara stepped down the steps slowly, braid half done, cheeks wind-bitten. She didn't wear her best dress. She wore the one she'd stitched before the war came to her door. I'll speak, she said. But I won't sit in a room while men debate what was done to me. I'll say it once. In my way. The marshal nodded. She looked to Boaz. Come with me. He stepped forward. Always. They rode together into town, quiet but not afraid. When Nara entered the courthouse, the room hushed like prayer. She didn't weep. She didn't tremble. She simply told the truth, about the man who bought her weight, not her name. About the trunk. About the girl with the red dress who begged a stranger to open it. About what it means to be heavy and still worth lifting. When she finished, no one clapped. But no one spoke either. It was the silence of reverence. The kind reserved for survivors. Afterward, she stepped outside into the cold and leaned against Boaz's arm. Her breath fogged the air. I thought I'd feel lighter, she said. But I just feel real. Boaz took her hand. That's heavier than truth. It's living. They didn't speak of the trial again. Days passed. Then weeks. No more riders came. One morning, Nara opened the cedar box again and threaded her needle. She pulled the unfinished dress into her lap and began to sew. Millie brought her a ribbon she'd found under the porch. For the collar, she said. That evening, Nara hung the 7th dress on the porch rail, not on a line. Boaz stood beside her. I never asked what she meant to you, she said. Boaz tilted his head. Your wife. Your child. He looked at the horizon. They were everything. But I didn't save them. Not when it counted. She placed her hand over his. You saved someone who didn't know she was worth saving. He turned toward her. You saved yourself. I just stood close. The wind kicked up, tugging at the dress on the rail. Behind them, Millie laughed inside, chasing a moth with a wooden spoon. Nara whispered, I think I'm starting to feel it. What? That I'm not in the box anymore. Boaz's eyes softened. He reached into his coat and handed her something small, a carved button in the shape of a bird mid-flight. She pinned it to the dress without speaking. That night they sat on the porch in quiet, knees just touching. Then a sound broke the stillness. Hooves again. One rider. Fast. Boaz stood. The rider dismounted breathless. Langford's in custody. But he named names. Says he sold women west of the divide. Girls. A dozen or more. Same trunk. Boaz's jaw clenched. You need her to name them? No, the rider said. We need her to help us find them. The girls. The ones no one's claimed. Boaz turned to Nara. She rose. I'll go, she said. But not alone. He stepped beside her. She looked down at the 7th dress. We'll need more than one. He smiled. You sew, he said. I ride. Together they walked into the house, where Millie had drawn a crooked map on the floorboards in chalk, names only she remembered. And somewhere far away, a girl in a box opened her eyes for the first time in days, not knowing that freedom was already being stitched with her name in the hem.